Welcome to Re-Alliance Radio, the podcast that explores how regenerative paradigms, principles, and practices are being brought to life in communities all around the world, especially those living in the front lines of ecological and humanitarian crises. In this season, we are hearing stories of regeneration in action, real examples of how people are weaving ecological solutions into the places they live. Today's episode turns to a topic that is essential for our everyday lives. It's sanitation. When we talk about regeneration, we often talk about soil, food, water, or biodiversity. But sanitation sits right at the heart of all these things. Human waste contains valuable nutrients such as nitrogen, phosphorus, and organic matter, enough, in fact, to fertilize around 250 kilograms of cereal per person per year, as a new Re-Alliance Ecological Sanitation Guide explains. It handles safety, it can enrich depleted soils, grow trees, feed crops, and even provide fuel through biogas systems. Unfortunately, in many displacement contexts, human waste is treated as something to remove, export, or hide. Conventional sanitation systems are often expensive, polluting, and fragile, especially in places with limited infrastructure, funding, or land. Today, we are joined by two incredible guests who are helping bring these ideas to life. We are joined by Mellett, part of Re-Alliance team and the author of a new ecological sanitation guide. Mary has spent years exploring how to safely close the sanitation loop in displacement context and how communities can turn human waste into an asset rather than a burden. Also, we have Naswirah Nalukwago, who lives and works in Nakivale Refugee Settlement in Uganda. Naswirah is part of a collaboration between Re-Alliance IIC in Uganda and local communities, designing and implementing regenerative approaches to settlement planning, including ecological sanitation, compost systems, gardens, and more. Well, I can't just wait to explore this topic with two amazing guests. Right. So we start straight away with Naswirah. You work in Nakivale Settlement and you promote composting toilets as a solution in Nakivale. Could you share a bit about your context and some of the challenges residents face around sanitation?
Thank you so much. I'm really super excited to be part of this podcast and to be really hosted today. Good evening, good morning, and good night wherever you're watching this. So currently, my name is Nalukwago Naswirah. I own an organization called Bassattu Innovations, which is a local solution-driven, community-based organization that is in Nakivale Refugee Settlement. Nakivale is a home of thousands of refugees all over the country, whereby sanitation in terms of toilets is really a challenge, very expensive to manage. And in this crisis of funds being cut, managing toilet waste becomes a disaster. Where I come from in parts of New Congo, New Sangano, whereby there is a lot of slums, people are really so many in the places. It is really so challenging that even managing home toilet waste is a disaster that brings a lot of typhoid, a lot of diseases like cholera. And then think about the children. Think about the children below 5 who really cannot use the toilets. Water being a crisis in the situation, a majority of the toilets are pit latrines. I think of a refugee home whereby you've really been given a little space of land. You have a toilet, you have a household, you have children in the same space. So when this toilet gets full, you don't have any other solution. That is the picture of the settlement, and that is how we are. Then making matters more worse, in the entire district, that is the Sinjo district, we even don't have a treatment plant for toilet waste. So this really puts the entire, even the host community at risk. as Bassattu Innovation, we really see this as an alternative, and we don't see this as a burden, but as a game changer that will have solutions and save the future, as we will be exploring in the future, in the coming conversation. Happy to be here, and over to you.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that input. So we turn to Mary. You have recently authored the Re-Alliance Guide on Ecological Sanitation. Could you tell us what is ecological sanitation? Why is it so important in displacement settlements like Nakivale? How does it fit into a regenerative integrated design?
Thanks so much, Boris. Really nice to be here. And thanks, Naswirah, for really painting the context of where we're talking about, because some of this can feel very academic, and it's great to have the real kind of groundedness in place. Ecological sanitation is not a new thing. It's an age-old description of treating wastes with passive processes. So these are natural processes that you don't put energy into. Nature should do that for us, and they break down human waste into beneficial products. Now, time can be an ecological sanitation measure, in that if you store wastes for long enough, time naturally degrades them. Composting can be an ecological sanitation. You've got things like anaerobic digestion. So there's lots of natural processes that break down wastes anyway in the environment. Ecological sanitation harnesses these and contains things so that it's done safely. I suppose, just to refer to the guide, the kind of new part of the guide itself is taking the leap from ecological sanitation, where you use natural processes to treat, to then saying we should use the resources that are generated by this if they are safe to do so. So ecological sanitation's been used for a long time. It's not new. However, the fact that you don't put energy into it means that it's something that can be used where resources are scarce. And then again, in the refugee setting where resources are scarce, as long as the safety measures are managed properly, it makes sense to then use the resources in some way to build up the capacity of natural systems. And now this doesn't need to mean just one thing. It could be growing trees, it could just be enriching the soil. But the key is not for it not to be used as a pollutant, which it often is, but to be used as a benefit. There are lots of benefits that you can do, and you have to work out what's the safe benefit to use. But let's join up this thing of ecological sanitation and reuse, so that we're actually using to a productive end things that are in other circumstances seen as a problem. And in that way, it reduces pollution as well, and that's the most important thing.
All right, thank you. I mean, it's amazing to know how this system works, and it's powerful to hear how sanitation is connected not only to hygiene, but to dignity, safety, and in fact, land health on daily life, and how communities themselves are leading this change, like in Nakivale. So I'll stay with you, Mary. The guide outlines several technologies from composting toilets like fossa attenders to urine diverting dry toilets to vermicomposting to biogas. Could you walk us through the core idea behind a couple of these systems? What makes them really ecological?
Sure. Those are various different systems there. So there's lots of different technical approaches there. The thing that makes them all ecological is that they use natural processes to break down wastes. I'll describe a couple of them for you. So an arbaloo is a system whereby you dig a pit, but instead of it being a deep pit that's emptied, it's a shallower pit. And because it's shallower, it means that air can get in, which means that composting can occur. So it's an aerobic process, and that actually can increase heat, although it doesn't in all systems, to break down wastes faster. And then the idea with an arbaloo is that once it's full, you plant a tree on top, and then you move the superstructure above to the side, and you dig a new pit. Now, this needs space, so it's not good in all settings. The positive thing of this system is that because the pit is shallow, it can be done by communities. There is no emptying of the pit because a tree is planted. There's no moving of the waste, so there's no pollution from it, provided it's put in the right place, because if it's put near water, it would be polluting. So you've got a system there that's manageable by the community. It produces trees as long as you look after and water the trees properly, and you have sanitation from it. So it's a closed loop system that can be managed by the community if there's enough space and community capacity to do that. And that kind of system is recommended for households, not for big communal latrines. Moving to something like biogas, which is kind of on the other end of the spectrum in terms of how technical it is, this uses anaerobic digestion. So it holds wastes together in a closed system. There's water within the system, so it's done without oxygen underwater, and gas is produced. This is a much more technical system, so you need to have the capacity within the community to maintain it. And often you'll need to have multiple waste streams going in because it needs to be fed. And generally it takes, I think, something like 6 people's wastes to produce enough fuel for one person to cook on. So it won't meet everyone's needs, but it can be used for cooking on stoves or for little lights. So there you've got the arbaloo, they're very simple, through to the biogas, which is more complicated, but all can be managed at a community level. Another example you gave was urine diversion toilets. These separate the urine and the faeces. So it's another dry system in that water's not used. There's a complexity to it in that you have to train people to use the toilets differently from how they would normally use that. So you have to check that your community's on board with this. And in this system, urine is siphoned off. And if it's used at a household scale and done safely, if you store the urine for 3 months, you can then use it diluted with water to irrigate and fertilise crops, provided that's for household use. So you're then making use of the urine that was a waste to be a fertiliser. You're minimising the kind of the pathogenic load, which is the faeces. That does have a lot of pathogens in it, and that over time, as long as you give it enough time, breaks down to be a kind of a harmless, well, a less harmful product that can then be used as a soil enricher as long as it's put in the right place. And again, that's something that's generally used for household, although some people are using it for communal latrines. If there's reuse in the system, it's best done at household level. So I think I've done arbaloos, biogas. Our fossil alterners was the last one. I can quickly talk to you about fossil alterners. They are similar to the arbaloo process, but instead of planting a tree, you have 2 pits and you swap between the 2. So that you can do the same system as the arbaloos, but without planting a tree and simply having a composting area that you switch between the 2 pits. So that's another low management alternative.
Right. Thank you. I'm really happy to know that all these processes are natural and that's why they are ecological. And I'll turn to Naswirah. In Nakivale, what kinds of ecological sanitation solutions are being explored? How are community members involved in designing them?
Great. Thank you so much. It is really so absurd that sanitation has really been given the minimal attention in the humanitarian sector, whereby we have few actors into this space. The few actors that we are having, I'll talk about YISE, that is one of the partners that I am working with. They have started benchmarking EcoSan toilets, which is really demonstrating higher results. And people are really liking this due to the fact that they are using fertilizers now, again, to plant their vegetables, which is a really good learning. Then some few people are using composting toilets at also a prototype level. And this is something that also is demonstrating change and impact, more especially in the new arrivals, because these people come and they are there. So now, how are these people really being involved? People are really being involved in cash for work. The cash for work, this is whereby a participant or a beneficiary comes, you work with them on building the toilet, constructing the toilet, and he or she gets money as a motivator for them to really have what to eat and also learn a skill so that it can be passed on to another generation or another village. It is one. Then two, we are really trying to do the co-designing, understanding, and starting from the ground level with these participants or these beneficiaries. We now co-design with them through trainings, through workshops, so that we can understand. I'll give a good example of the initiative that we are currently running called Fuel How with Waste. whereby we are more interested in getting that waste, turn it into fertilizer, briquettes, or turn it into energy. But it really came to our understanding that even these participants do not really understand the importance of them using the fuel, the toilet waste. They really still had a mindset that toilet waste should be dug, and if the pit is full, go dig another pit. So currently, this is something being done. Then, on a good note, the district engineers, especially in the water department, are really now chipping in with the research aspect to sit with the refugees, we make some research and understand what can be worked on a small piece of land. How best can we construct the toilet? Because it all starts from even the inception of the construction of the toilet. Because if you don't construct the toilet very well, it is going to be hard for you to get our cake. I always call it cake because it's more value than what we think. So that is how we are interesting the humanitarians, we are interesting the development partners, and so far we've already reached out to the district partners to really chip in into this. We start from the research level. We co-design with the communities because organizations come and go. But think about this participant or this beneficiary that will stay in Nakivale for more than 10 to 30 years. So that is how we are, that is what we are doing in Nakivale. And with time, this would be given an opportunity. We see how best we can turn it into use. Thank you so much, and over to you.
Okay, so Mary, the guide talks about the importance of keeping things simple, robust, and manageable by community. Keep it simple, keep it going, keep it growing. Could you explain those principles?
Yeah, sure. This is how we try to make some very complicated ideas as simple as possible. So anyway, I'll start with keep it simple. The idea behind this is that the more complex the system, the more vulnerable it is to failure. So if in the future people are really forced to be more involved in managing their own sanitation, which sadly is the funding landscape that we're now living in, then systems need to be simple and they need to be understandable by the households, the community, and then the wider kind of state that oversees that. This is not to literally displace responsibility to just and put it onto a household, but it's a reality that people are going to have to be more involved in the systems that they use. And to that extent, things need to be simple. So what is simple? Simple is treat waste on site wherever possible. Every time wastes are moved, it does create extra risks. You can move them with water. You know, the pipe systems we have, I'm living in the UK, and I'm sure from the rest of the world, the idea of piped sewage seems wonderful and a great relief to be able to flush the toilet and it just disappears. But we have huge problems here with our rivers. The fish are dying, the rivers are polluted. You take a problem and you put it somewhere else. But that problem's still hurting people. People are still getting sick from swimming in our seas. People are still getting sick from swimming in our rivers. So by moving waste somewhere else, it doesn't actually fix the problem. So we're saying try and treat waste on site wherever possible. Keep waste dry and don't opt for systems that use flush water. And this is the same thing, really. If you flush something, you're moving it. And now you do have systems that flush into a tank that's right by the system. And for some communities, that's absolutely right, because that's the culture they've grown up with and they don't want to move away from that. But if possible, if you keep it dry, you get to retain your water. Water's a great resource. Why should we put poo in it? It's just going to make it dirty and then we can't use it. Keep water for things that preserve life, right? So we can drink our water, we can irrigate our crops with water. Unless a community is really, really committed to flushing and won't change, then why not look at ways of not putting water with our wastes and keeping water for the important things? And then create products that can be reused locally with minimal processing or transport. There are often very, very complicated schemes of turning waste to value, it's called, but they involve lots and lots of chains and lots of input from different organisations. And once funding's withdrawn, there's been big schemes on, for example, turning waste into briquettes for cooking on, which is a great scheme until funding's withdrawn. So it's, if you can keep it simple, and just, for example, just used wastes for enriching the soil to then retain more water and grow trees and crops, then that's simple and it's kept within the community that needs it. The more complex the system, the more often it fails once funding goes. So think for the future, think simple, and then use simple passive systems that can be easily understood and maintained. So one of the simplest systems, honestly, if we've got enough space, is just time. If you leave wastes without adding extra material to them for over a year in hot countries, it can be up to 2 years in cold countries, then actually that is treatment. That is a passive treatment. You're just leaving it without adding extra. So there are some simple ways of doing it. And of course, there's problems around space and around not having enough time in high pressure environments. But there are simple ways of treating waste. If we can use them, let's do that. Composting, anaerobic digestion, they are also simple in the right setting. So that's keep it simple. Did you want me to talk about keep it going and keep it growing as well? Or does that come later?
Yeah, keep it growing.
Going to keep it growing, okay. So keep it going is once you've got a solution, make sure that it's going to last, because there are things that are put in that work in the short term while there's funding and while there's lots of people kind of there for the emergency or there for that round of funding. And once they've gone, systems can fail. So we need to think about, look, going forward, is this going to serve a community once all the experts leave? So if we can build systems that could be maintained by local people and allow for safe, non-mechanised emptying, so not getting a huge desludging lorry in that sticks its pipe in and sucks it all out and then drives away again, because that system's only going to be there for as long as the funding is there for that truck and those workers. And where is it going to take it anyway? So if we can move to non-mechanised emptying and local processing, in circumstances where it's possible that funding will be cut in the future, people aren't left without a service. This isn't to say that governments and INGOs don't have a responsibility to people. I'm not saying that we should just leave people to get on with it. However, you do need to think about the idea of what happens when people leave. Can the communities really continue this without the external support? So that's keep it going. And just to say that 70% of current refugee populations are displaced for over 5 years. So often you'll come in and you'll put a short-term latrine solution in and move out, but actually you need something that's going to last years. So moving away from latrines to household toilets, household latrines, and putting it within smaller community settings is so important, and of course takes funding. So I'm not trying to say that this is all something that communities can do just on their own, because funding is needed for it. And then design for climate change and increase extreme weather events, because toilets that need water that may be in an area that has water now might not have water reliably going forward. So we need to bear climate change in mind. So they need to be resilient to drought, flood and extreme heat in many, many situations. And again, this is thinking about the longer term, keeping it growing. So, for example, urine diversion dry toilets are great solutions for areas prone to flooding, and dry toilets don't need flush water. So you've got options within the ecological sanitation kind of suite of options that can fit different contexts. But just think about the extreme weather events that could come, say, once in every 5 years. They might then come once in every 3 years. Could it flood? Could there be drought? Bear that in mind. And then the last one is keep it growing. So this is the idea that once you've treated waste simply within the community, that you then use it to produce some kind of life. And often that's plants and trees. It can even just be soil health and life. You can use it for the restoration of kind of habitat. You can plant trees. You can plant trees for fuel, for cooking. So it doesn't necessarily have to be for food. It just needs to increase the biodiversity and the natural resources of the area that people can then use. So, for example, you could have reforestation, you could have slope stabilisation, so it's just helping to grow things on slopes so that you don't have landslides. You could include it in planting for flood protection. You could grow plants for animal fodder or green manures. You could have food for growing in household kitchen gardens and for fertilising bushes and trees. So, in general, growing for food is much done on perennial crops. Don't do it on annual crops. And within the guidelines that we've put together, it talks about how to do it safely. But if it's managed safely, food can be grown as long as lots of considerations are taken and it's done on a small scale.
Right. Thank you so much. I just want to encourage our viewers to get this guide because it's really simplified, just the way you explain it, and it goes along with nature because nature itself is very simple, it's very practical. Sometimes we just complicate it by trying to remove and adding things on nature. So, all right, maybe we'll come back to Naswirah. Please stay with us. One of the arguments in the guide is that ecological sanitation can actually reduce environmental degradation in and around settlements. For example, reducing deforestation for firewood, improving soil health, or preventing sludge pollution. Have you seen any of these signs in Nakivale?
It's 100%. And I encourage the world, if we go ecological and we turn these toilets and waste into use, we will really attain reduced deforestation. First and foremost, using the fuel how with waste initiative, we've already tested the charcoal briquettes that really come from the fecal sludge, and they are long lasting. In Nakivale, people don't even have forests where to cut. They are now up. They go burn the papyrus, use the papyrus for cooking. So I believe this is an alternative that is really needed in the times where they even bring a lot of influx from Congo, because on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, an influx comes in from Congo. I was also making some arguments in the UNHCR boardroom, telling them we don't have any other alternative currently. So I believe that fecal sludge turned well into fuel, it would be one thing that we can use. It is really so interesting that all the soils in Nakivale are really non-productive. Partners have tried to do what they feel can be done, giving participants good methods of agronomic methods, providing seedlings. But at the end of it all, nothing is really got from the gardens. So there is a high demand of organic fertilizers, and the toilet waste would be number one, because when it's available, we have it, and a lot of money is used to dislodge it from the toilets to really go and throw it in places that are really also disturbing the environment. Then three, we also have issues of unemployment. Can we all focus on creating green jobs? We really remove the other mindset of, hey, this is toilet waste. And then we focus in the area of green jobs, providing them for women, providing these jobs for the youth, in alongside the value chain from making or designing the toilets to emptying the toilets. Or we can also go to packaging, branding, and also distribution of either fertilizers or charcoal briquettes or anything. So when we really embrace this as a creation of jobs to the refugees and the host community, I think we will have our target being achieved, because our refugees are unemployed, and a number of them even don't have skills that can be employable. So this is one way whereby we can chip in and shout hard as humanitarian actors to see that we create jobs into the sector of sanitation, to one, make it sustainable, because there is also that question of how is it going to be sustainable after us injecting in money. So I really see it in that angle of employment. Thank you.
Right, this is great. Just the aspect that it is connected to community needs, and it's not just environmental. We are not just helping ecology, but we are also helping ourselves, community members. I'll ask this question to both of you. Probably you catch your breath. Mary takes it first. What are some misconceptions people have about compost toilets or reuse systems, and how do we address concerns around safety? Mary?
I think one of the commonest misconceptions is that systems where you flush it away or move it away to a centralized treatment place are safer than systems where it's contained locally and treated on site. And I think if you can move away from thinking that just because it's taken away, it's safe. Because number one, the status quo isn't safe. Taking it away moves a problem. It doesn't necessarily fix the problem. And so keeping it and treating it on site still has its risks, but they're not greater than taking it somewhere else where it has similar risks and it outsources the problems. One, the status quo of taking it away is not necessarily safer. Second, that ecological sanitation, because it's natural and you're not putting lots of inputs in, isn't effective. It is highly effective, but the risks need to be managed and understood. So yes, it's effective. No, taking it away isn't necessarily better. And then thirdly, reusing waste products is necessarily harmful, and is the risk of reusing them is greater than the benefits that you get from them. And I think as organisations, we can often think it would be a risk to do that. It's a risk, therefore we won't do it. However, if you manage the risks, the benefits can be greater than the risks. And sometimes not to act, as long as the risks are managed, is worse than doing nothing. So if treated waste can be used for a productive end, and I'm not saying there's one magic answer. It could be briquettes, it could be fertilizing the soil, it could be growing trees. You have to think about your context and what resources you've got and what the environment is. But if you find the right reuse, then reuse can be safe as long as risks are managed. And then I would say, just for the counter argument, one of the misconceptions I've also come against is if, for example, compost from compost toilets smells like soil, looks like soil, it has no pathogens. That's also not true. There can still be pathogens, even when it looks and smells okay. You know, things like parasite eggs live a long time. So you have to be careful you don't swing the other way and say it's completely safe, it's all okay. It's about understanding, yes, there's risks. How do we manage them? And maximise the benefits for people and place. And I think Naswirah spoke about that so beautifully around all the benefits there are to the community around not cutting trees down for deforestation, giving people meaningful employment, dealing with sanitation. It's this kind of big picture. And if we can look in the big picture, then the benefits really can outweigh the risks. But we have to be mindful of the big picture and all the risks and all the benefits.
Thank you. And Naswirah, you want to take on that?
Over the misconception about ecological toilets, people think it's unhealthy in terms of hey, if I'm really going this way, this is really so unrural. People think they are for the rural communities, that great grandparents of ours. That is one thing. Then two, another challenge is about them being so expensive. When I really came up with an initiative of fuel how with waste, the first perception everyone was like, hey, how are you really going to manage this? The project needs a lot of billions of money. Not knowing that innovations of this type, you really need to sit with the community, manage it, because it is me and you to come up with a solution at a smaller level, and then we replicate it later after people seeing the benefits. Then now we have a challenge of a lot of demand creation. For example, people think if I one size fits all. If I really do it in my context, some cultures don't really think about it. They're like, hey, how will I use the same toilet with my either my great grandchildren or with my grandparents? So we have some beliefs around this. Then another challenge or another perception is people think this is really so primitive, and I'm like, hey, how are you really going to go primitive in this way, in this .com era? So we really need a lot of demand creation to really tell people, and the way I'm really approaching this is coming up with the benefit side of it. Really tell them, hey, look, this is a challenge that we are having in the community. We don't have firewood. Can we try out this as a solution? For example, doing biogas out of the toilets that you have at home. And then you do a cost-benefit analysis of you are spending this much, you're going to reduce this much, and this much will help you either pay school fees. So I think the mindset should really now be more of the cost-benefit analysis. How much are you spending? How much are you earning? So that we can embrace this technology into the humanitarian setup. Yeah, that's all that I had. Over to you, Boris.
Right, amazing. I mean, showing the people the disadvantage in one end and bringing them the advantage on the other side. I mean, that's the best way, one of the best ways in which you could educate and make people buy in into ideas that, like they say, it is not ancestral, so it's kind of new to them, and it's not easy for people to adapt to change, you know. All right, so Mary, this is for you. What surprised you the most developing the guide? You know, were there moments where you realized this is absolutely possible? We can choose, we can close a loop safely, even in challenging contexts. Just share with us.
Surprised me the most. Do you know, it was a project from, I think it was the 90s, and it was in Nepal. And it was, this is that I researched and I spoke to one of the people involved with putting the project in. It was Nepalese. Sorry, I'm gonna try and remember the details, but it was a Nepalese refugee camp, I think, where they'd done what they called pit latrines, but they weren't. They were two shallow pits, and they were fairly shallow, household scale. And communities were using these. Sorry, families were using these, and the pits would fill up over the course of a year. Then they'd move to the next pit, and they'd use that. So it's a twin pit system. And after a year, the compost was then moved to a composting pile where it was mixed with food scraps and things and composted further. And then eventually it was used in the gardens for people. Now, this is an integrated reuse scheme from the 90s when everybody was saying use pit latrines, most places. People then used to grow food within the community. And it lasted for something like, I think it was 15 years, if not more, until eventually everyone left the camp. Each toilet was managed by the community and the family, and it was just done so simply without lots and lots of kind of fanfare around it. The community just understood and managed it and grew their own food for their own consumption with it. Now, that's something that a big organisation would probably feel concerned with funding because of all the risks involved at every stage. And yet here is a community that managed it in a refugee setting, and it was for big numbers of people. So I thought that this was at the end of innovative. It's not innovative. People have been doing this for a long time. It's just big organisations don't want to associate their names with it. It does feel risky in some cases. But actually, we've got to move to saying this is possible and there's great benefits from it. So what surprised me was how much actually is being done out there. A heck of a lot is being done already, and how willing people are to change their practices and adapt to something new if they feel benefits from it. They've got to benefit from it. If they see no benefit, then why would you change your practices? But if people can feel a benefit, then in many cases, people I've seen have changed their behaviour as long as the support's there. But people like Naswirah are working with the community, hand in hand, saying what's right for you, not this is what we're going to do. But in the right place with the right people, these things have been working for a long time. This isn't new. We just need to support the work that's already out there.
Right, amazing. Thank you, Mary. Thank you. So, Naswirah, for someone working in a camp, a settlement, or a humanitarian organization who wants to start integrating ecological sanitation, what advice would you give them?
First and foremost, I will encourage them that we are saving Mother Nature together. Is one. Poor handling of toilet waste really leads to the death of natural habitats. Think about the water. I think animals that really feed on this. So ecological sanitation would be one act that will help us to save nature. So really chip into the humanitarian space with that heart over the environment. Then two, we are talking of unemployment. So in order to empower communities, we should start with our problems that are within themselves and then turn them into innovative and creative solutions. If, for example, think about us training these vulnerable people on how to use waste into cash, on how to really reduce the amount of money being spent into a resource. So another one would be creating green opportunities for the youth and women. This is something that I'm really shouting out louder, that we can create jobs, we create decent employment from the gold chain of composting, composite, and organic fertilizer making from these toilets. We can also have create small businesses around collection, treatment, reuse of these fertilizers. So as a humanitarian worker, I really have this into even a peace nexus whereby meaning that, hey, you're building houses but with no toilets for refugees, and they're now coming up with destroying our gardens, doing open defecation. So can we really embrace ecological sanitation in a way that we see it in a 360 way of livelihood, employment, protecting the environment, and also creating peace in the refugee settlement. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you to Naswirah. Mary, you want to add something as we wrap up?
I suppose my only addition is just to what Naswirah was saying. I really loved the way she was talking about this 360 position, that actually sanitation can sit in the middle of so many needs. And I think she spoke really eloquently about how it's, it's livelihoods, it's nutrition. It encompasses lots of different sectors. And until we step out of just thinking about sanitation and look at the whole picture, you don't see all the benefits. But she put all the benefits beautifully there. And I think you're a great advocate, Naswirah, for it.
Okay. Right, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, a huge thank you to both of you, Mary Mellett and Naswirah Nalukwago, for your works. That regenerative sanitation is not just about managing waste, it's about restoring dignity, building resilience, strengthening ecosystems, and empowering communities. Well, for you listening who wants to learn more, the new Re-Alliance Guide, Ecological Sanitation with Reuse in Camps and Settlements, is freely available on the Re-Alliance website. It explores technologies, safety planning, reuse options, and design principles, along with case studies and illustrations to help you implement these systems wherever you work. The guide emphasizes the ecological sanitation would always be safe, simple, dignified, and integrated into the wider ecological and social system, and it provides practical options you can begin using immediately. Once again, thank you so much, Mary and Naswirah. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and your experiences with us. My name is Boris-Karloff Batata, your host for Re-Alliance Radio, and I look forward to joining you next episode.